Hey, folks. Hey, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a special live stream edition of the Watchman Newscast. Let me get my act together because we have some breaking news for you right now. We wanted to go live today. We usually would come to you with, we would record the Watchman Newscast and get it out there for you. But today, breaking news. This is what we do and why we do it, folks, to be watchmen on the wall for such a time as this. Israel right now is on the brink of war. The situation in Jerusalem, number one, but number two, rockets coming out of Gaza on a minute-by-minute clip, courtesy of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the terror kingpins in the Gaza Strip, targeting not only communities in southern Israel, but as far as Jerusalem and Tel Aviv may be in the crosshairs. Let's back up for a second. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Watchman Newscast. To be able to go live is a real privilege that we have here on YouTube and bring you the most up-to-date information on the escalating and developing situation in Israel. It is very fluid right now. We already have hundreds of people joining us. Welcome, everyone. Great to have you with us here on the Watchman Newscast. Obviously not on our usual set. We don't have the usual bells and whistles that we would on our daily Watchman Newscast. But you're not here for the bells and whistles. You are here for the information. Content is king here at the Watchman Newscast. So let's get into it. Some backdrop, first of all, as Israel again stands on the brink of war with Hamas in Gaza, yet another conflict with the terror group Hamas. We've had at least three major conflicts between Israel and Hamas dating back to late 2008 and several serious skirmishes that have lasted over a period of days during that same time span. And folks, right now, Israeli leaders are saying, Israeli Defense Forces officials are saying, the latest exchange with Hamas and other terror entities in Gaza, Iran-backed, by the way, key point there, this may last for days. We may be giving you updates throughout the week here on the Watchman Newscast. Let's set the scene. Today, Monday, May 10th, is Jerusalem Day. It's normally a day of celebration in Israel. I have been there on previous Jerusalem days, and it's a festive atmosphere. Jerusalem Day marks the reunification of the city of Jerusalem, God's holy city, the ancient and ancestral capital of the nation of Israel, reunified 54 years ago in 1967 during Israel's resounding victory in the Six-Day War. So every day, Jerusalem Day celebrates that event, and it's just essentially a celebration of the capital of the world, in my view, the city of Jerusalem, the center of the world, God's city. Unfortunately, Jerusalem Day has been marked, Jerusalem Day today, this year has been marked by massive violence. Let's back up. It all started Friday night, May 7th, around the time of Friday prayers on the Temple Mount. Now, sometimes our commenters ask, what is the Temple Mount? Why is it such a big deal? The Temple Mount is the holiest site in Judaism, number one. It is where Solomon's temple and Herod's temple once stood. As a Christian, it's also an extremely holy site. Jesus taught in that temple. That's where he chased out the money changers. It is described throughout the New Testament as well. Of course, it was destroyed in AD 70 by the Romans, but the Muslim conquest eventually in the 7th century AD brought with it the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Those two Islamic shrines are what currently sit atop the Temple Mount. Muslims consider it the third holiest site in Islam. So that's some background for you just to set the scene. The violence started there Friday night. Palestinian rioters attacking Israeli police and Israeli civilians. It has stretched out to today, 4 straight days of violence in Jerusalem, again, around the Temple Mount area and in and around the old city of Jerusalem. Why are they rioting? Well, according to Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas, Israel's so-called partner for peace, who's been cheerleading the rioters, by the way. More on that in a second. And according to Hamas, always a trustworthy source, the terror group Hamas in Gaza, the riots kicked off on Friday because Israel is, number one, in their words, desecrating and defiling the Temple Mount, which they call Haram al-Sharif. That's their term for the Temple Mount. Secondly, they are using as a pretext and an excuse a land dispute right now in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, right outside of the Old City in Jerusalem. It is a predominantly Palestinian area. Jews are trying to buy property in that neighborhood. Some Palestinians may be evicted. It's a legal case in the courts. The timing isn't the greatest, obviously, with everything else going on. But no matter what happens in the courts, again, it's a legal case being decided upon. The Palestinian leadership, Mahmoud Abbas of the PA and Hamas, are using it as an excuse and a pretext. They're not sincerely concerned about Sheikh Jarrah and the Palestinians living there. They're using this as an excuse, a pretext for a wider conflict. They're using it essentially as an excuse for jihad against the Jewish state. That's exactly what is happening. So Friday night it began. Every day since then, folks, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then today on Jerusalem Day, things really have spiraled. Now, the Temple Mount, again, home today to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. And by the way, we have thousands of people joining us right now. Hey, God bless everyone. I cannot see your live chat for some reason. I don't know why, but keep the comments coming. Our producer, Daniel, will send me any relevant comments. I know they're all relevant, but he'll send me any good stuff. If you have some questions, perhaps I can address some of those issues. But if this is indeed the third holiest site in Islam, and folks, I am getting, by the way, on my phone, literally every few minutes, alerts from the Israel Defense Forces. This one says, sirens sounding in the city of Ashkelon, just north of the Gaza Strip, more incoming rockets. We'll get into all of that in a minute. But just a point to make here, which I believe is very important, ladies and gentlemen. If the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock, if these are indeed incredibly holy sites to Muslims, and if Jerusalem is the third holiest city and the Dome of the Rock, or I'm sorry, Temple Mount, third holiest site, why do we have footage today? You can Google it. You can check it out anywhere, of Palestinian rioters inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque throwing bottles and rocks and even setting off fireworks, apparently. I thought this was holy. Are they not desecrating their own holy site? That's number one. Secondly, it got to the point where a fire broke out atop the Temple Mount today, Monday, May 10th, as these riots were going on. Apparently, it emanated from the Al-Aqsa Mosque and Palestinian rioters setting off fireworks and other materials. So to me, it's a head scratcher. If this is your third holiest site, why would you essentially defile it and desecrate it? Not to mention defiling it and desecrating the Temple Mount area for Jews and Christians who consider it obviously a very important site to our faith as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Yet the world is using this. Another alert here. Now sirens in the city of Sderot in southern Israel. More rockets incoming. At least 70 rockets as I come to you. It's around 4:00 p.m. Eastern time in the United States. It's around a little bit past 11 p.m. in Israel. We've had at least 70 rockets today, Monday, May 10th, launched out of Gaza towards not only the communities of southern Israel, but as far as Jerusalem. Again, more on it in a second. And Tel Aviv is very concerned right now as well, up the coast from Gaza. But I gave you the backdrop, why this is all happening right now, at least the view of the terrorist of Hamas and the radicals in the PA led by Mahmoud Abbas. And yes, I did use the term radical to identify Mahmoud Abbas because he is someone who is quite literally, and has for years, but even more so today, I guess he figures he has nothing to lose. I believe he's about 85 years old, cheerleading what's going on right now in Jerusalem. Today, folks, again, this is footage you can, if we weren't live right now, we'd roll the footage in for you, perhaps on tomorrow's newscast here on YouTube. But two Jewish motorists today driving outside the old city walls in Jerusalem were pelted, their car was pelted with rocks. Palestinian rioters attempted to pull them out of their car and lynch them. The one man was covered in blood. Thank God, alone one Israeli police officer came to his rescue, fired some warning shots in the air, and kind of warded off these people who were converging on these two men to quite literally lynch them. Don't believe me? It's happened before, and not only in Jerusalem, in places like Hebron as well. So We say all the time on the Watchman Newscast that the Middle East is a tinderbox. Folks, we are there right now. I want to talk about Gaza in a second and the rockets. We've got thousands of people joining us right now. Thanks so much. We want to be your one-stop shop on all things Middle East news related and how it affects you, no matter where you live. I live in the United States. You may live. Hey, we have viewers here at the newscast from all over the world. New Guinea, the other day, someone commented. New Zealand, Australia, Brazil, Finland, Mexico, Russia, Egypt, UAE, all over the world. You're watching the Watchman Newscast. We can't thank you enough. We want to really fill that Watchman role for you. But Jerusalem right now, the world talking about it, condemning Israel. Again, as I just described to you, we've got video footage of Palestinian rioters shooting off fireworks atop the Temple Mount, yet the international community, quote unquote, seems to be gleefully blaming Israel once again for this violence. And folks, this is a major outbreak. I think of the book of Isaiah, chapter 12, verse 2, which says that Jerusalem will become a burdensome stone. It will be like a cup of trembling for all the nations surrounding it, and anyone, any nation that comes against Jerusalem, because everyone covets God's city, will be cut to pieces. Grab your Bible, check it out. Zechariah chapter 12, verse 2. I believe we are seeing the culmination of that right now. Folks, the entire world covets Jerusalem. Everyone wants a piece of God's city, but it's his city. And that's a key point there. He holds the deed to the city of Jerusalem, a city I love, my second home. I'm in Jerusalem usually at least 5 times per year. So the Jerusalem piece is one part of this, folks. And the international condemnation of Israel, where you're saying you're not only condemning Israel and calling, and I'm talking about the EU, the Biden White House, the UN, you're calling on Israel to de-escalate the situation. It's all on Israel, whereas nothing is asked of or required of the Palestinian leadership. It's all on Israel. You must de-escalate. And Israel's saying, how can we de-escalate when rockets are being fired at our capital city, Jerusalem? How are we supposed to de-escalate? Are we supposed to say, hey, Hamas, please stop? It's not very nice of you to launch rockets. So perhaps the international community, that term again, perhaps rather than asking all sides to restrain themselves, perhaps the international community should have a nice chat with Mahmoud Abbas and the leadership of Hamas. Better yet, how about the Iranian regime, which is lurking behind the shadows, folks, in all of this? Why do you think this escalation is happening? Hamas is using Jerusalem as the pretext, but the Iranian regime is pulling the strings behind Hamas. We know that. Hamas is bought, paid for, funded by Iran, as is Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the other terror organization in Gaza right now. So if Iran says jump, Hamas says how high? Much like the Houthis in Yemen, much like Hezbollah in Lebanon, much like the Iraqi Shia militias in Iraq. So that's the situation we have. Now, one more piece of news to give you before we get in depth into Gaza, because as I said at the top, if you are just joining us, welcome to a special Watchman Newscast live stream. You can tell I'm pretty worked up here because this is war at the doorstep here, and the reporting on it has been a disgrace so far. So I'm trying to give you the truth of what's going on here. One last thing in terms of the condemnation of Israel and the nations of the world demanding that Israel de-escalate and back off. One thing to keep in mind, I'm going to talk about this in depth on a newscast later this week, and we have more and more people joining us. Welcome, everyone, to the Watchman Newscast special live stream update to the minute on what's happening right now in Israel and the precipice of war with Gaza. One more reaction to mention, folks. Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Remember him, the Turkish tyrant? Well, he's been kind of silent the past few months, which is very odd. That's not like him. He's a very verbose individual. He said yesterday that, quote, and again, this is a NATO member nation. He's the leader of a NATO member nation, Turkey. And Turkey and Israel still have, at least officially, diplomatic relations. And I keep getting these reports. Sirens are sounding throughout Israel right now. Rockets are falling, at least 70 at last count, probably close to 100 in the past few hours alone. Please pray for Israel and pray for the peace of Jerusalem right now. But Erdogan says yesterday that, quote, Israel is a cruel and terrorist state, and we will save Jerusalem, meaning him, meaning Turkey. Today, Erdogan put in calls to Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, and Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority, and basically said the same. We will unite the world, is essentially what Erdogan said, against Israel to make sure they, quote, stop these acts of terror. And we will specifically and first and foremost unite the Islamic world for the sake of Al-Aqsa, of Al-Quds, of Jerusalem. That's what Erdogan is saying. Now, two things to keep in mind here. Number one, again, this is the leader of a NATO member nation, folks. But under Erdogan's radical rule, and he's a Muslim Brotherhood guy, he is the Turkish, his party, the AKP, it's pronounced, they are the Turkish version of the Muslim Brotherhood. He's an Islamist in a suit and tie. He doesn't look like one, but he very much so is. Yet, he's a member of NATO with the West, with the U.S., Britain, France, all the rest. But under Erdogan's radical rule, I refer to Turkey as NINO, NATO in name only. That's the situation under Erdogan's rule. That's first. Second, why is he calling for the Muslim world to unite right now against Israel and to, the way he put it a few years ago, liberate Jerusalem? His words. Because at the end of the day, Recep Tayyip Erdogan wants to lead a revived Islamic caliphate. He's made no secret about it, folks. Again, he's Muslim Brotherhood. And the Brotherhood's whole rationale for existence, I wrote a whole book about them in 2013, by the way, called The Brotherhood. You can check it out on Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. So I know of which I speak. I've done in-depth research on the Muslim Brotherhood movement and interviewed Brotherhood leaders in Europe. Erdogan is certainly Muslim Brotherhood through and through, and their whole rationale for existence is to revive the caliphate. So when Erdogan talks about uniting the Islamic world, and that's what a caliphate is, right? A united Islamic world, perhaps with Jerusalem as its capital. Various radical Islamists have discussed that over the years, making Jerusalem the capital of a revived caliphate. Erdogan is one of them. I think this has prophetic implications. Actually, I know it does. And we've talked about this on previous live streams and on previous newscasts. Again, wow, we've got thousands upon thousands of people joining us right now. Welcome to this Watchman Newscast live stream. Hey, for such a time as this, as events are fluid on the ground in Israel, in Jerusalem, the center of the world right now, and in Gaza, let's go to Gaza. Let's talk about that. I lost my train of thought for a second there. There's a lot of news coming in. Believe it or not, folks, not only on the Jerusalem-Gaza front, there's more involving Iran, the United States. I'll get to in a minute. You're not going to believe it. At least 6 major news items have developed over the past 24 hours alone in the Middle East, outside of the Jerusalem conflict and the emerging war with Gaza. But let's focus on Gaza for another minute here as more and more people join. Thanks, everyone. I cannot see your comments for some reason, but my producer, Daniel, is on top of it. He will send them my way. Thanks so much for joining. Can't thank you guys enough. Again, we want to be the place you come to when things are breaking in the world's most chaotic and strategic region, the Middle East, because what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. Prime Minister Netanyahu, he's still the prime minister, even though that's another story here, right, folks? The political instability in Israel, which gives off exactly the wrong message to Israel's enemies. Folks, let's get it together there. I mean, 4 elections in the past 2 years, maybe even a 5th. Israel must get their house in order politically and decide on a prime minister, because this is, again, giving off the wrong message. So Prime Minister Netanyahu right now is vowing a very strong response. And as I mentioned at the top, IDF officials are saying, hey, this is going to last for a few days. What you're going to see, folks, at least in the beginning, is heavy aerial bombardment of Hamas and quite possibly Palestinian Islamic Jihad targets in Gaza. You're going to see Hamas military and terror targets taken out by the Israeli Air Force already. I just got an alert on my phone. Again, I get these. Gosh, I've got so many. I can't even keep up right now, folks. I'm getting so many. A Hamas terror tunnel was taken out in an airstrike. What are the terror tunnels? Well, this gives you an idea of what you're up against with Hamas and what you're facing and the kind of men that they are. Hamas has been very adept over the past decade or so at digging tunnels from Gaza into southern Israel. Underground tunnels. I mean, millions and millions of dollars they've put into these. These are well furnished. They have walls, ceilings, lighting. And what they do is the plan is at least to pop out like rats from underground on the Israeli side of the border. Pop out and either carry out a terror attack, or perhaps they pop out in the middle of a kindergarten or a school, kidnap Israelis, women, children, drag them back through these tunnels like something out of a horror movie, back into Gaza, hold them either as prisoners or torture them or kill them. You know the rest, God forbid. But that is the essence of these Hamas terror tunnels. By the way, Hezbollah has them as well on the Lebanon border at Israel's northern border. So Israel has targeted a terror tunnel. More and more people joining. Welcome, everyone. We're going to keep going here on our live stream. Another thing to keep in mind, we're talking about the rockets, probably at least 100 by now, because when I started this, folks, there was 70 at least. I'm getting alerts every minute or two, literally on my phone, blowing up from the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, alerting more sirens are blaring in the communities around Gaza. But we want to get to Jerusalem in a second, and the rockets that went towards Jerusalem as well. Red line completely. But I wanted to mention also these incendiary balloons, I guess you would call them. Now, we think of balloons as something you'd see perhaps at a child's birthday party, right? You know, someone holding a bunch of balloons. I think it would be a bunch of balloons, you would call it. A great image, right? It's springtime, fun. Well, Hamas and various terror entities in the Gaza Strip have taken this innocent pastime and this innocent symbol of childhood innocence, basically balloons, and they are making them into incendiary devices. They did this a lot in 2018 and 2019, caused a lot of damage in southern Israel, where folks remember agriculture, farming, that is the big industry in southern Israel. So what Hamas is doing is they are floating these balloons from Gaza into southern Israel, and then they are scorching thousands of acres of land. These balloons land, they're aflame, they're incendiary, they're flammable. They land, say, in crops or fields in Israel, agricultural fields where farmers work hard every day to help feed the nation of Israel, and they're scorching hundreds and thousands of acres of land. That happened really badly in the summer of 2018 and the fall of 2018 in particular. They have started it back up, has Hamas and its various allies in Gaza. That has started back up again in a major way over the past few days. So the communities of southern Israel are not only being hit by rockets, but terror balloons. Yes, I know it's very diabolical, but this is what you're dealing with. They will use any means, will Hamas, for a device or a tool of terror, including children's balloons. Welcome to 2021, folks. A time where, as the prophet Isaiah said, evil is called good and good is called evil. As we've seen the past 24 hours with the world community's reaction to what's going on right now in Israel, blaming Israel and pointing the finger at Israel and scarcely holding terrorists who are bombarding Israel with rockets and combustible balloons and God knows what else responsible. Let's talk more about those rockets in the range. And again, thousands of people joining us. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. What a blessing, right? That YouTube is a source for us to be able to come to you, or a venue, I should say, for us to be able to come to you live in real time with real-time updates. Keep the chat going. Thousands of people with us. Wow, we have a huge audience right now. This is great. I wanted to mention the extent or the distance of these rockets today. Now, we've been keying obviously on southern Israel and how they've borne the brunt, not only today, but for the past decade and a half of these rockets. I've been all throughout those beautiful communities in southern Israel, from Sderot to Nachel Oz and all the kibbutzes all along the Gaza border. These are beautiful communities, and they're under siege, folks. I mean, these are people with bomb shelters in their homes. That's no way to live. But unfortunately, that is how they are forced to live because of the likes of Hamas in Gaza. But key point, the rockets today, at least 7 launched out of Gaza, were aimed towards Jerusalem and Bet Shemesh and cities in the central area of Israel. Now, Jerusalem, folks, is a red line. And I'm quoting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said today, Jerusalem is a red line. There's going to be a seriously heavy response from Israel for the targeting of their capital city. I have friends. One friend in particular lives in Mevaseret. Another lives in Modin, the city of the Maccabees from your Bible. Modin and Mevaseret, a beautiful community outside of Jerusalem, who sent me pictures today and videos, massive plumes of smoke near their homes. This is going on right now. Dear friends of mine with kids, with little children, can look out their window and see massive plumes of smoke. They can hear the explosions not too far off in the distance. And Iron Dome, by the way, they can hear that as well, shooting down some of these incoming projectiles. That's the situation. I've been in Israel during an exchange. November 2018, Israel went at it with Hamas. Over 400 rockets were launched at Israel in a 24-hour span. I was there on the ground. I was in Sderot. And yes, folks, I did have to run into a bomb shelter. So I got a taste of what Israelis live with every single day, especially in those southern communities. And it's not pleasant. But nevertheless, they are resilient and have a great and courageous attitude. And again, these are beautiful communities that they have built there in southern Israel. But now we're reaching Jerusalem. And there were threats today by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, for one, to target Tel Aviv as well. Now, some 75% of the Israeli population lives in and around the Tel Aviv metropolitan area and along that coastline area, the Mediterranean coast. That's north of Ashdod and Ashkelon. And Ashkelon's been hit very hard today, by the way, by rockets. But Tel Aviv is another red line. And there is a very real possibility that Tel Aviv could be in the crosshairs, God forbid. Rewind, as I'm going to check my phone here and see the latest. I'm coming to you from my laptop here. Again, not our usual fancy schmancy, all kidding aside, set that we have here in the Watchman Newscast, just coming to you down and dirty, live here. But you're not here for the bells and whistles. Tel Aviv is preparing for rocket fire. Some quick alerts for you folks. Schools in central Israel are shutting down over rocket fears. Dozens of injuries from rockets and stones. Rocket alarms continue to sound throughout Israel right now. It's nonstop. I'm getting alerts on my phone. IDF news desk. Hundreds of Palestinians, by the way, injured today in these riots, and dozens of Israeli police and some Israeli civilians as well. It's a mess. It's a tinderbox right now. But I mentioned 2014, the last major war that Israel fought with Hamas in Gaza. Again, there have been some major flare-ups, like I mentioned. November 2018, I was there. November 2019, we also had one. But the long, hot summer of 2014, it lasted for about 60 days, and Israel went into Gaza on the ground. And some 58, I believe, Israeli soldiers lost their lives in that exchange, in that conflict with Hamas. 58 might not sound like a whole lot to you, but for a nation the size of Israel with only 8 million people, that adds up. That 8 million people, a little over 6 million Jews, that's a lot, folks. Any casualty is awful and horrific, but 58, especially for a small nation like Israel, really hurts. And that was the number, somewhere around 58, I believe, in 2014. But the rockets 7 years ago, hard to believe already, rockets in that exchange reached as far as Ben Gurion Airport around Tel Aviv. reached as far as Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, someone commented on Twitter, an Israeli living in Jerusalem, that 2014 may have been the last time that sirens went off around Jerusalem, warning of incoming rockets. But folks, that's what we had today. So 2 tracks, again, Jerusalem on one hand, Gaza on the other. This is going to escalate, I fear, over the next few days because Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Iranian proxies, with certainly the full prodding and backing of Iran, have not shown an inclination to stop the rocket fire right now, nor has the international community, which is spending so much energy or expending so much energy on pressuring Israel. They're not necessarily pressuring Hamas and Islamic Jihad to rein in the rockets, or the Iranian regime, which they know is pulling the strings behind these 2 entities in Gaza. Why not go straight to the source, the head of the snake in Tehran, and say to Khamenei, hey, knock it off with the rockets. Stop it now. Rein in your proxies. He won't do it, and they won't require that of Khamenei. It's much easier to gang up on the world's one and only Jewish state, the nation of Israel, and that's what's happening right now. So if Hamas and Islamic Jihad keep up this flow of rockets, and especially, folks, if they go even further to Tel Aviv, to Jerusalem, this thing's going to escalate. Make no mistake about it. And in Jerusalem, again, clashes today ongoing right now. It's about 11:30 p.m. in Israel right now. At last check, and I'm checking every few minutes, still clashes. Let's look again. Still clashes on the Temple Mount. Let's look again. Fresh volleys out of Gaza. And let's check real quick. Now, we have an updated number for you. Over 150 rockets fired from Gaza into Israel today, Monday, May 10th, on Jerusalem Day. Imagine that. The IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, is striking back. It's going to Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, said today it's a red line, these Jerusalem rockets. Israel's going to hit them hard. Now, they have said they will not go in on the ground. I mentioned 2014, a ground incursion. We have close to 10,000 people with us live right now. This is awesome. Welcome, everyone. Israel is saying right now it will not go in on the ground, but there will be heavy airstrikes against Hamas targets and Palestinian Islamic Jihad targets throughout the Gaza Strip as the rockets continue. As I come to you, folks, in real time, this is really happening. It's unfolding right now, and it's a blessing that we have this platform here at YouTube on the Watchman Newscast to bring you up-to-date information. Clashes continue in Jerusalem, number one, and we've got over 150 rockets have been launched out of Gaza into Israel, and we are on the brink of war to the south. Now, if you watch the Watchman Newscast on a regular basis, you know that we talk frequently about the great northern war that's coming. Obviously, Gaza is to the south, to the southwest, the Gaza Strip, where tensions or hostilities are really unfolding now, potentially another war. But the big one, folks, and not to downplay Gaza at all, and obviously the horrific impact the terror organizations there have on everyday life in Israel, now even reaching Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and points beyond. But you think this situation with Hamas is bad in Gaza? You ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to southern Lebanon and Hezbollah, Iran's most powerful, most lethal proxy. Some 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel as I speak. Folks, that situation is going to blow up, no pun intended, very soon, I believe. I've called it the Great Northern War, where Israel will be forced to face off against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon with that massive rocket and missile arsenal, and Hezbollah and Iran in Syria, also to the north. There's a major showdown coming there. It's a question not of if, but when. It's not me saying that. It's Israeli officials and Israel Defense Forces officials who I interview for the Watchman TV show have told me that many times. But another key point here, when this Great Northern War breaks out, and we're seeing a bit of a preview of it today, folks, rest assured that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, deep to the south, and also the Iraqi Shia militias to Israel's east, they will all be activated by Iran. I call it the Ring of Fire, which surrounds Israel. The Gaza Strip is part of that. It's literally, it encircles Israel on all sides. It will activate. There will be rockets and missiles from all sides coming at Israel when that major war breaks out. You may be saying, oh my gosh, this is horrible. What are we going to do? And it is horrible. And it is a nasty business for sure. And it is coming. Let me encourage you. Let me take a breath here as I report on breaking news here, and it's coming in fast and furious. I'm trying to keep you all updated. The God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, neither slumbers nor sleeps. His eye is on this right now. And we're celebrating today, Jerusalem Day, right? Which was a miraculous victory for Israel in the 6-day war. All looked lost. People were literally digging mass graves before the 6-day war. All looked lost. Egypt, Syria were gathering on Israel's borders. And then Israel got a miracle. A preemptive strike took out the most of the Egyptian Air Force on the runway, on the ground, before it even got a chance to take flight. And there was that war. It lasted 6 days, a resounding victory, a miraculous victory by Israel, reunifying Jerusalem. That's what's being celebrated today on Jerusalem Day. And it's really tragic to see Jerusalem desecrated today by these rioters. But the reunification of Jerusalem, Israel also reclaiming the Golan Heights in that exchange, also took the Sinai Peninsula, which obviously was given back to Egypt in the late 1970s as part of that peace treaty between Israel and Egypt under Anwar Sadat. But hey, if you're fretting right now about this ring of fire that we're talking about, and folks, I take no delight in sharing that, but it is news, and this is the Watchman Newscast, and we want to bring it to you straight. This is what's happening. We think you'd rather know than not know. It's as simple as that. This is a very informed audience that we have, and you want to know, and we want to supply that information to you. This is the mandate, the mantle that God Almighty has given us, and we're gonna take up that mantle. We're gonna go with it. The Bible says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." Here at the Watchman Newscast, we want to guarantee that you're not lacking knowledge. Share it with your friends, your family members, your neighbors, your coworkers, because we are in the days, folks. These are Bible times that we are living in right now. I want to give you one more sirens. IDF text message. Let's see. 1 second on WhatsApp. Look at this, rocket upon rocket, if you could see that. But I want to give you a quick update on some other major news stories out of the Middle East. Yes, Jerusalem and Gaza is our main focus, obviously. We'll be talking about, I'm sure, throughout the week as we have thousands, tens of thousands of people now joining us live. This is awesome. Welcome, welcome. Some stories you may not have heard about. And if you're just joining us, we've been talking Gaza war. We're on the brink. We've been talking Jerusalem clashes. You'll be able to watch the entire newscast in our archives here on our YouTube channel. Just click on newscast. You'll see it here. And while you're there, please subscribe if you haven't already. But I want to get you up to speed also on 6, I believe, major stories in addition, can you believe it, to what's going on right now with Gaza, Jerusalem. Number one, today, news just broke, folks, before I came here on this live stream, that the United States and Iran once again faced off at sea. I believe it was in the Persian Gulf. Again, I scanned this quickly before I hopped on with you. But I believe it was in the Gulf. U.S. ships were approached by some 13 Iranian vessels, namely these speedboats, where they're literally speedboats, but they are armed, and Iran will harass U.S. ships. We've seen it time and time again. We've talked about it on the Watchman Newscast. Just late last month, Iran pulled this. Well, apparently a U.S. ship today fired at least 30 warning shots to ward off these armed Iranian speedboats that were harassing it. That is a big deal. It's a major escalation. The spokesman for the Pentagon today talked about it a bit. I believe the incident happened today. The announcement of it from the Pentagon was today. Perhaps it happened a day ago. I'm not quite sure. Again, just scanned it real quick before I came on, but it's breaking news, so I wanted to tell you what we know so far. So that's another major escalation. That's one thing I wanted you to know. Number two, the United States has been hit by a major cyber attack. It started on Friday, targeting the largest oil pipeline in America. It stretches from Texas up to the Northeast where I live, supplies Pennsylvania, New York, states up here. That pipeline has been taken offline by a cyber attack. Apparently, some shadowy group is behind it. Not sure what nation they originate from. There's a lot of candidates: China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. But that pipeline has been taken offline. It has not yet impacted gas and oil prices, but it very well could. So hopefully it gets back online and that situation is rectified. But a major cyber attack against the most significant oil pipeline in the United States. That's another big story outside of what's happening in Israel right now, right? Third, the Bushehr nuclear reactor in Iran suffered a major fire over the weekend. Now, we're not sure if the reactor was damaged, but hey, as you well know, if you watch us on a regular basis, there has been this sabotage campaign for the past year against Iran's nuclear sites and its ballistic missile factories inside Iran on Iranian soil. And once again, perhaps we saw that in Bushehr. No one claimed responsibility, but it was a massive blaze, folks, that broke out there near an Iranian nuclear facility over the weekend. This comes on the heels, of course, of the explosion at the Natanz nuclear facility in late April, which Israel most likely was behind. It took that nuke facility, which is enriching uranium, which is, you do that for one reason, to build the bomb. It was taken offline, at least for a short time, by that explosion. Now the fire at Bushehr, a fourth item we have to share with you. Another update. If you're just joining us, welcome. We have tens of thousands of people now with us. This is great. A fourth update. Did you hear about this? And did you know that yesterday, Sunday, May 9th, as Jerusalem was on fire and Gaza was heating up, and if you're just joining us, we just talked about it for about, 38 minutes, I think. Check out the full newscast in our archives, and I'll wrap up before we go with an update for you all. But one more story. An oil tanker off the coast of Syria yesterday went up in flames. Now, the flames were apparently put out, but an oil tanker off the coast of Syria, what does that make you think of? Well, we know that Israel has targeted Iranian oil tankers off the coast of Syria, which were heading to Syria at least 14, 15 times over the past 2 years. Why are they doing that? Why are they preemptively targeting these oil tankers? Well, Iran is attempting to transit weapons and oil to its allies, whether the Assad regime in Syria or Hezbollah and other terror entities. Obviously, they can take the weapons and use them to kill Israelis, but they can also take the oil and reap the profits from selling that oil. And then those oil profits go to fund terror against, you guessed it, Israelis and American soldiers who are in Iraq right now. So Israel, wisely, has been kind of heading them off at the pass and sabotaging these ships, these shipments of weapons and oil bound for Syria from the Iranian regime. Now, Israel has not claimed responsibility for this publicly, but it's a pretty good bet that Israel is acting in its interests to do just that. So that was the fourth major story that's unfolded. Number 5, believe it or not, all of this unfolding. Do you think we live in Bible times right now, ladies and gentlemen? Do you think what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East? I think so too. Today, a rare strike in broad daylight in Syria. An Israeli helicopter targeted a building in the Quneitra village. It's on the Golan Heights. I've stared at it many times in my travels and reporting from and filming on the Golan for the Watchman TV show. You can look from the Israeli side of the Golan Heights into Syria, and Quneitra is staring you right in the face, and it's a hotbed for Hezbollah and the Assad regime. But in particular, Israel, of course, is concerned about Hezbollah. They carried out some strikes there last week, helicopter strike, and killed a few fighters, apparently. Now, today, there was a Hezbollah fighter apparently targeted there as well. Again, this is right along the Syria-Israel border. So that's 5 other developing stories for you in addition to what's happening in Jerusalem and Gaza right now. I think I said I had 6, but folks, I have so much going through my head right now trying to keep up on all this. I forget the sixth story. Let me check out my notes here and let me give you an update. I'm checking what I am getting in real time for you from the Israel Defense Forces on my phone. I've been getting texts every few minutes. The latest we have, sirens continuing to sound. Now, not in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, thankfully, but sirens continuing to sound bad enough in southern Israel as we speak. The sirens continue. Ashkelon, Sderot, the rockets are coming, at least 150 at last count. Let's check real quick. I'm just scrolling through my phone here for you. I apologize for looking away from the screen. Let's see what we've got in real time. You are joining me on the brink of perhaps a war between Israel and Hamas and other Iran-backed groups in Gaza. Today, Monday, May 10th, sadly enough, this is Jerusalem Day, a festive day, a day of joy and celebration. Terrorists have hijacked this day. Still 150. Let's check out some more. Keep the chat going. I know it's awesome. I cannot see it right now, but I know you guys are going back and forth, which is great. The Israel-Gaza fighting persists right now, and this is going to last all night. Rioting continues on the Temple Mount around the Al-Aqsa Mosque. By the way, I think I mentioned earlier in the newscast, so we've been going now for about 46 minutes. There was a fire on top of the Temple Mount today. I did mention that earlier, emanating from the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I do want to find that sixth story for you. Folks, it's going to be a very noisy and crazy night in Israel. I can tell you that right now. All night, this is going to be happening. There's going to be rockets fired out of Gaza, and Israel will be responding with airstrikes throughout the night. And the Iron Dome missile defense battery and other missile defense batteries in Israel will be working overtime tonight. Please pray for the people of Israel, for the peace of Israel right now. I have so many friends, obviously, in Israel. It's my second home, and I'm filming there 5 times a year when it's not COVID, and many dear friends and keeping in touch with them and communicating with them. So I wanted to get that one last update that I had for you guys. If I can find it. I just laid out 5 stories for you in addition to what's going on right now, if you can believe it. No, how can I forget? This might be the biggest of them all the U.S.-Iran face-off today, pretty big deal, obviously, but outside of what we're talking, Gaza and Jerusalem right now, did you hear, folks, that yesterday in the North Arabian Sea, the U.S. Navy intercepted a ship that was chock full of weapons that were bound for the Houthis in Yemen. Now, this ship, a small ship intercepted by the U.S. Navy, there's pictures online. It's insane. You had assault rifles, assault weapons, anti-tank missiles, grenade launchers, just laid out everywhere on the deck of this ship, and these weapons were reportedly headed into the hands of the Houthis, the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen. Now, the ship was unmarked. There was no national flag on it when the U.S. Navy seized it. Where do you think it came from? Call me crazy. Do you think it may have come from a port in Iran, courtesy of the Houthis' Iranian masters? That's my guess. They've been equipping, funding, and training the Houthis around the clock for the past few years, and it's intensifying, and the attacks against Saudi Arabia, courtesy of the Houthis, are intensifying, and now the Houthis are threatening Israel. Who's pulling those strings? The head of the snake is in Tehran. Do not forget it. If you take one thing away today, the head of the snake is the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people, a proud people, a great culture, a great history, ancient Persia. The regime is the problem, folks. I think we're going to wrap up very soon, or maybe we'll go the full hour. What do you guys think? It's 4:49. We can go 10 more minutes, right? There's no shortage of things to talk about, and we have more and more people joining by the minute. This is great. Where do you all think this is heading? I'd like to know. The chat is wild from what I'm told. I can't see it right now, but my guy Daniel's telling me it's a wild chat. We've got tens of thousands of people live right now. I don't think I've really taken a breath in the last 50 minutes as I've been bringing you what we hope is the best Middle East update that you'll get anywhere. in real time here on the Watchman Newscast. But this thing is real, and it's happening right now. Right now, it's confined to Gaza, of course. Could it escalate elsewhere? It may very well. We don't anticipate Hezbollah throwing its hat in the ring right now, or the Houthis, or the Shia militias in Iraq, or Iran directly getting involved. But folks, in the Middle East, expect the unexpected. That's what I can say. One last check, then I'm going to let you all go. Let's see what's going on. One last check. I have not gotten any text from the IDF in the past 10, 15 minutes. Thank God. That's a good sign. It means no rockets in the past 10, 15 minutes. Let's scan the wires and see what we have real quick, and then we'll get going. Temple Mount, still stuff going on there. Still rioting. Still over 150 rockets launched at Israel out of Gaza. Folks, we hope and pray that this does not lead to a broader war, but everything's on the table right now, and Israel has been very clear that Jerusalem is a red line. The targeting today of Jerusalem with at least 7 rockets towards God's holy city. So this could escalate. We'll be here for you. I can guarantee here at the Watchman Newscast, we'll be here for you. We will report on this for you. We'll make sense of it for you. We'll break it down for you. Not only the situation in Gaza and Jerusalem, but hey, we just shared with you what else is going on in the region, right? 6 major stories outside of Gaza and Jerusalem that we just shared with you. A thought to leave you with, kind of closing the circle from the beginning of the newscast. Jerusalem, third holiest site for Islam, and the Temple Mount, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Then why not only would rioters today set off fireworks and bottles and rockets from the Temple Mount, Palestinian rioters, Palestinian Muslims. Got another alert from the IDF, more rockets coming, and I'm sad to say. But why would Hamas, if Al-Aqsa is so important to Hamas, why would it launch rockets at Jerusalem today? If Jerusalem is the third holiest city, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is so important to Hamas, why would they potentially hit it with rockets in rocket launches today? Very interesting how that all works, and how Hamas and its ilk use things as a pretext for terror and pure evil. And that's, folks, that's what it is. What's unfolding right now at the hands of these terror organizations is evil. Yes, evil exists. I know we live in very morally relative times, but I believe God Almighty is very black and white. There's not a lot of gray areas with God. And Hamas is evil, folks. There are no redeeming qualities to this organization. I'll leave you with that. Sometimes you need a fresh dose of moral clarity, and in these very unclear and morally relativistic times that we live in, it can be refreshing to get the truth delivered to you unfiltered. That's what we try to do here. We're going to get going here. It's been a great 53 minutes with you. Wow. Live. And hey, everyone's still hanging out. No one really left. So this is great. And we had tens of thousands of people, and we still have a lot here. Love y'all. God bless you. Hey, subscribe if you have not subscribed. Tell your friends about it. If you missed the first half of the newscast here, check it out here. It'll be under newscasts on our YouTube channel in our archive. Check it out and share it with others. Pass it on. As we leave, it's nearly midnight in Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for Israel. We will be back with you tomorrow here on the newscast. Be sure to follow us Facebook and Twitter. It's at Erick Stakelbeck. Instagram, Erick.Stakelbeck. We'll have updates there as well. God bless you. Until tomorrow, hang tight. And remember, never hold your peace. Take care.